Welcome to Everything Co-op, bringing you information on how cooperatives can help improve your quality of life. This show is being sponsored by the National Co-op Bank, NCB. The NCB is dedicated to strengthening communities nationwide for the delivery of banking and financial services for the nation's cooperatives, their members, and other socially responsible organizations. For more information on the power of community ownership, visit ncb.coop. That's ncb.coop. Now stay tuned for your host, Vernon Oakes.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome this bright and wonderful, cheerful Thursday morning. You know, this is a great day. Sun's up, we're up, and we're going to talk about cooperatives today. This is Everything Cooperative, and NCBA, National Cooperative Business Association, is celebrating their 100th year. They started in 1916. And today we're going to talk about Cooperation Jackson in Jackson, Mississippi. Kali Akuno. Good morning.
Good morning.
How you doing today?
Other than losing my voice slightly, I'm doing all right.
Well, it's come across really good. So when you lose your voice slightly, it still sounds extremely wonderfully well. So you blessed, bro.
Right. All right.
Can you tell us what Cooperation Jackson is?
Cooperation Jackson is an emerging cooperative federation and supporting institutions based in Jackson, Mississippi. We are close to our second anniversary, so a relatively young organization and network. However, the thinking that went into Cooperation Jackson and the preliminary planning spans well over a decade. So we are in the middle of a number of transformative projects in West Jackson that range from developing a community land trust, where we already are landowners of over 20 lots and looking to expand that. And that is the core of what we're calling a Sustainable Communities Initiative, where we're looking to construct an eco-village that is kind of a work-live space where there are urban farms, where there's grocery stores, and other kind of supporting cooperative enterprises. Then we're also in the process of developing kind of a whole cohort of other cooperative enterprises in and around the city to serve some vital functions and needs, particularly towards helping the city become more sustainable, the largest of which is a recycling and composting cooperative, which is going through some preliminary motions and preliminary operations as we speak to kind of begin that whole transformative process. But we also have a number of other kind of related projects. One is an emerging partnership for an organizing institute with some of the labor unions in our city and state. And the other piece is more of a collaborative piece with the city council, which is the construction of a human rights charter for the city of Jackson, which we hope to have benefit this transformative process around building solidarity economy in Jackson, Mississippi. So our plate is full.
I can tell you,
full.
Yes, I can see that, and you've said a whole lot of where you are today and what you're looking for. But can we go back a minute? Was Jackson, Mississippi, the site for the movie The Help?
It was, yes. There was a part of it was right. That's right. I almost forgot about that, but that is a core site of where that history was located.
And what I've been doing a lot on the program now is, since we are celebrating NCBA's 100th year, was like, what was Jackson like in 1916 and 1960, and then bring it up to the date? Because I have visited Jackson, and Tougaloo College is, I think it's right, it's next to, it's not in the city of Jackson, but it's close by.
It's in the city of Jackson.
It is in the city, okay.
Yeah, it is in the city of Jackson in a very odd way, because it's, Jackson is one of these municipalities that actually exist in 3 counties. And Tougaloo is part of Madison County, but I would say about 90% of Jackson is actually in Hinds County. So it got incorporated in a very weird way. And for your audience, Tougaloo University is a HBCU, a historically black college and university, and it's one of two which exists within Jackson city limits, the other being Jackson State University, which is substantially larger. But Tougaloo is a very kind of important historical moniker in our city, and a lot of critical leadership over the years has come out of Tougaloo. And it's also been a site of, speaking of kind of the anniversaries, the March Against Fear that James Meredith initiated, and which became kind of worldwide known for the enunciation of Black Power from Kwame Ture, better known to many as from Stokely Carmichael, that happened in the course of that march in 1966, in June 1966. That a lot of the central events that happened at Tougaloo College. So, but to go back to part of the piece, going back to 1960, Jackson was a radically different place than what it is now. It was predominantly white in 1960. I think at that point, my memory serves me correctly, the demographics were that Jackson was slightly larger than it is now, over 200,000 people. But it was predominantly white, I think, to the tune of roughly about 70% white in 1960. And the demographics have totally flipped in reverse over the course of those 50 years to now the city is 80% black, roughly about, I would say, 17 to 18% white and 2% other. So the demographics have radically shifted. The economy from one era to another has shifted significantly. Mississippi overall is still very dependent upon agriculture. That so much hasn't changed, but Jackson did have much more of a manufacturing base in 1960 than it does now. There's still some in industry and manufacturing base here, although it was never substantial. It was much more than it is now. So there were more blue collar employment. Jackson has always been, it still remains from 1960 to now, a major kind of transportation and freight hub, and to give folks kind of a sense of where and how Jackson is strategically kind of situated within the U.S. Economy and the Southern regional economy. It's at the crossroads, really, of kind of two major highway flows, and even before that, a connector between the Mississippi River traffic flow, which comes down the Mississippi, primarily agricultural products, wheat and corn. So we're about 30 miles from the river. So we do act, in some sense, as a port for the Mississippi River. But then there was the rail infrastructure, which got built, in the later half of the 19th century, that made a lot of crisscrossing stops in Jackson. And so the highways kind of got built as an overlay of the old rail infrastructure. So we are, a stop on the I-20, Interstate I-20, and a stop on the Interstate 55. And the I-20 is its major kind of function and purpose is to connect Atlanta to the Dallas-Fort Worth area. So we're one of the stops kind of on that trucking route and that transportation route. And the 55 is really a connector from New Orleans to Chicago. So we're a stop on that route, just kind of looking at that T intersection. And so there's a lot of infrastructure built in Jackson that is around that accommodates the transfer of goods and services from those different routes and all of the routes in between. And a lot of our economy then and now is still somewhat built around that. But I think one of the major transitions, other than the demographic transition, which was pretty significant, the median income has significantly dropped. As a whole, the city is much poorer now than it was on average, and the citizenry is much poorer now than it was in 1960. And the economy outside of what I described is also shifting. The major shift now is that from more kind of industrial or labor jobs. The largest employer in the city of Jackson now is primarily in the medical industry, and the second largest being government, and the third largest being the university system. So it's very dependent in many respects on what we call kind of anchor institutions, things that aren't going anywhere soon. but things that don't have kind of great multiplier effects in and of themselves. So that is something that Cooperation Jackson is really looking at to where do we add value and where can we be transformative to kind of strengthen both kind of the manufacturing sector of the economy here in the long term, and to do so in a manner which we're bringing in and developing more green tech and next generation technology kind of enterprises to the city and the region to improve the overall wages and quality of life of our community.
Sir, you say a lot. I'd like to try to break some of this down so that our readers can get it. Kylie, I was looking at the map here. 55 goes from New Orleans through Jackson to Memphis, St. Louis, and then Chicago. So it covers a lot of territory. And you got Charlotte, Atlanta, Jackson, Shreveport, Dallas on 20. I mean, so I can see I never thought about Jackson that way as being sort of that hub where the T crosses, and so you get a lot of traffic. But I'm really concerned about this median family income. You say 70% white in 1960 and 80% black in 2016. That's 56 years. What caused that trend? Why did the white leave flight and blacks came in and the median family income went down?
Well, it's a simple and a complex question. I mean, the main reason for the shift, I would have to say, was just kind of blatant racism. Mississippi was one of the last states, and in many respects, it's still fighting. Some sectors of it, some populations in Mississippi are still fighting a war against desegregation. Many sectors are still fighting the Civil War. In fact, very openly and very viscerally here in Mississippi. That is still true. But I think the major thing had to be, once those major struggles against segregation and the victories that the civil rights and the Black liberation movement had in the 1950s, 60s, and on into the 70s, once those transitions started to have kind of more material impact, what you had in Jackson, Mississippi was a very rapid and very haphazard white flight. And it still has a major impact on both the economy and the politics of the city and the state overall. So Jackson was one of the late kind of transition cities where white flight took place. That it really didn't start until the 1970s, but once it got going, it was kind of an immediate freight. So the transition from being, majority white to majority black really happened within about a 20-year period. And then there was a lot of haphazard construction of kind of satellite white suburban communities primarily to the east of Jackson. So you have places like Ridgeland, Flowood, Pearl. These are municipalities which all border on Jackson, and Byram to the south.
Kylie, we're going to have to take a break on this white flight, and we'll be back and talk about that and how the blacks came in and median family income went down. We are going to take our first break. If anybody out there has a question of Kylie or myself, you can call in 1-800-450-7876. We're talking about history. We're going to go back to what's happening now and then looking toward the future. We'll be right back. Don't touch that dial.
1450 WOL.
Information is power. That's WOL's motto, and that's mine too. I only add with information, and National Cooperative Bank is providing you information through this show to talk to you about cooperatives, how you can come together, form co-ops, or look out to find a co-op to join. And with the information, if you put some action to it, then that's when you get the power. And right now we're getting a lot of information from Cooperation Jackson. Kylie has just given us so much information, and we'll keep going. You were talking about white flights, white leaving the city of Jackson, going out into the suburbs, taking their jobs and their money with them, blacks coming in, and then the median family income going down. So they didn't leave the area. They didn't leave the state. They just went around to the suburbs, from what you were telling me.
Well, it was a combination of both. I mean, many people did leave the state, and that's still a major issue, particularly for young talent, black and white, in the state of Mississippi. There's still a lot of out-migration that does occur. But in the main, folks didn't leave. They just kind of moved further out into these suburbs that they kind of hastily constructed. And you're right, it did take a lot of the capital and the businesses with them. And that's a pattern which continues to exist, where most of the retail and commercial services that exist within the metro region actually exist outside of the city of Jackson. And it by any kind of economic analysis or index that you look at, if you look at the suburbs, none of them have the population density to justify the types of commercial investment that has been built there. And then they're really dependent upon a customer base from Jackson, which supports those enterprises. So you're talking about your big box stores, your supermarkets, your entertainment complexes. Those all survive in those suburbs from Jackson patronage, and the choking off of those in the development of those enterprises in the city of Jackson. So this is a long struggle that is going on, which is kind of now at a fever pitch. We can get into a little bit later, but yeah, the flight basically started the trickle in the 1960s and kind of grew to a flood in the 1970s and 80s. And what you had in corresponding also at that time with the medium family income dropping is that you had primarily a phase wherein agriculture became more and more mechanized in the state and or redundant, meaning that it was certain aspects were completely shut down as more cotton was shifted to be produced in, say, California or elsewhere. And you kind of got into this dynamic, I think, beginning in the 1970s, wherein the federal government was actually paying a lot of farmers to underproduce or not produce or to shift their production away from cotton and corn and beans and things of that nature towards trees, to where now trees are the largest. Tree shepherding and husbandry is the largest agricultural product in the state of Mississippi. So that was a major shift. But what that did was displace a lot of folks who had been working in the farmland in the eastern part of the state, particularly in the Delta, as they were forced out due to mechanization and the transfer of enterprise. They fled to places like Jackson, but they came with very few to no resources with them. Very little by way of education, given the very segregated and underfunded and quality of education that many people were receiving. So they came to Jackson right when the jobs were leaving. There were less resources to kind of help facilitate a transition to do education. And so people were kind of left with the crumbs of what was left in the city, and that's a dynamic that we're still working and struggling against to the present day.
So in Jackson being the state capital of Mississippi, you said it's medical, government, and university. Those are the three main hiring people. They're the and manufacturing has basically left. So when whites leave, blacks come in, there's just no jobs or very few jobs. So the median family income goes down.
Yeah, very few jobs. Very few jobs, and a lot of the jobs that say that might remain, those. If you look at those three, all three of those, the vast majority of those jobs, and the higher paying end of jobs in the medical field, in the government's field, and in the field of college education, all of those require for the most part some type of advanced degree, and it's very hard for folks who have little resources to save enough often for their kids to be able to afford to go to college. And then since the 1980s, I think, as we all know, federal funding for college is kind of drastically decreased at the same time. It's been reduced at the same time while tuition prices have really started to skyrocket since the 1990s. So you kind of have all these adverse effects which kind of perpetuate certain dynamics of impoverishment of communities like Jackson.
Kali, we have a caller on. Hassan, good morning.
Good morning. How you doing?
Great. What's your statement or question?
Here's my question, and wanted to say hello to your guests, too. A couple questions, or three questions. One, what is the transportation industry like in Jackson, as far as trucking and delivery, courier services. Are those services needed? And also, are there any black banks or anything of that nature in Jackson where the people can put their money in? And also, can you give us a list or website to go to for co-ops? Because I know a lot of people actually have been thinking about relocating to Jackson. But again, you're just trying to figure out the different nuances of what's going on. So if you can kind of give me some information on those three, and I'll take it off the air.
Hassan, thank you very much.
All right.
Kali.
All right. So the first piece about transportation is the fourth largest employer in the city. But the main thing is that those are truckers who are mainly independent these days that come in and just use Jackson as a pit stop. Their operations are not primarily based here, meaning their garages and things of that nature are not primarily based in Jackson. But there are a good number of services that tend to kind of their needs in terms of gas and auto repair and things of that nature. And then they pick up certain freight from industrial sites that remain in Jackson. But the vast bulk of those are actually to our east in those cities and municipalities that I mentioned. Mm-hmm. So Jackson is really kind of a throwaway stop. But it is one of those areas that we have identified that we want to, this is being Cooperation Jackson, we want to do some development around the city so that we can both capture more of that economy and have more say in the actual flow of goods and services and use that to kind of extend and build up the tax base in Jackson. So we're thinking about it in a major way and trying to figure out a strategy of how to go about pursuing development in that particular industry.
Kali, in terms of before you go to the second one, are there any black-owned truckers? Do any blacks own their own trucks and do the transportation?
Oh yeah, there's a good number. There's a good deal of that. There is a good deal of that. It's a significant number of black-owned truckers who own their own trucks. Who work fundamentally as independent contractors. So there is an organizing base there. There's a skill level there. But, the main thing is how do we move them from being subcontractors to being more prime, being able to control their own garages, their own space, and pulling resources together.
So if you can
there's a great deal of potential.
If you can get the truckers to come together and they can both get more business if they're larger, and they can also perhaps demand more money, because if you only own one truck, and I've done some research in this, you only own one or two trucks, you're at the end of everybody. I mean, you just get flipped around, and the primes, the subcontractors of the subcontractors will give you some business, but they don't cut off all the margins on it. You just don't make any money at it. So yeah, that's a great opportunity there. So the second one is black banks.
There are two black banks in Jackson, and there are a number of cooperative credit unions, or credit unions, as people would know them, that exist in Jackson. And that is where we encourage, in those two areas where we encourage the community to do most of their banking. Mississippi has some very interesting banking laws, and we do not have a lot of the major banks that many people throughout the country now have, since a lot of banks like Wells Fargo, Bank of America, they're not regional entities anymore, they're national entities. But we have some Wells Fargo operations in the state, but no Bank of America operations in the state, mind you, and that is one of the largest kind of commercial banking enterprises in the United States and at the world. So that tells you a lot around, give you some indication of the kind of the odd nature and restrictive nature of banking in the state. But Trustmark is the largest bank. The largest credit union is Hope Credit Union. So that is kind of the lay of the land and the infrastructure here.
What's the name of the
community?
What's the name of the two black banks?
The two black banks. Let me go in deep into my.
That's okay.
It's not rolling off the tongue, but we actually have an account there.
We have to take our second break, and so while we're on the break, maybe your brain will kick in and tell you what they are. And then the third part of Hassan's question was co-ops, what co-ops you do have and what you're forming. You told us a little bit about what you're forming, but we'll be right back to get the answers to these questions. Please don't touch your dial. We'll be right back.
$14.50 WOL.
Welcome back, everybody. This is Vernon Oakes with Everything Cooperative. You know, we're talking about Jackson, Mississippi. We have Kali Akuno on the phone with us from Jackson, Mississippi. National Cooperative Bank is sponsoring this program. NCB's mission is to help cooperatives grow by supporting and being an advocate for America's cooperatives and their members, placing special emphasis on serving the needs of communities that are economically challenged. And Kali has already told us the median family income in Jackson, Mississippi is fairly low. But I Googled it while we were on the break, and we'll come back, and I was just shocked here to see that Jackson, Mississippi median family income is $22,473 US, and Mississippi's $26,000, which is still very low, and where the U.S. on average is $30,815. The median family income in Washington, D.C. metropolitan area is like $98,000. So talking about Jackson, Mississippi of $22,000, I don't remember, maybe you know it, what do they consider poor or in poverty? I think it's higher than $22,000. So I would think that the average
it's higher than $22,000. I think the breakdown of it, I think now it's 32 almost. Which means that roughly the entire city of Jackson, looking at those figures, fall below the poverty line, and that is we can substantiate and validate that as a truth from living experience and organizing in the community. Now, of course, you're looking at something that's an average. So there is a range.
Yep.
Within that.
Somebody's making zero and somebody's making 100,000,
right.
But the majority of the people
right.
are at 22, and probably 80% are between 20 and 25 or something. So yeah, it's poor.
Right.
That's the whole message here. But I want to go back to Hassan's questions. We got that there are two black banks, and then he asked where you can find co-ops.
Yeah, so my memory did come back. So there's two different divisions of Liberty Bank, which is based out of New Orleans, or where it started. So we have different divisions of that here in Mississippi, and we have accounts with them and with Hope, which is a predominantly black credit union. So that is who we've strategically put what little resources and assets that we have for strategic purposes, Hassan and anyone who's listening. Because part of this whole, I think, struggle for us, the struggle for equity, is about being very strategic with what little resources we have and using those in the most advantageous way to do the development that we need and really accumulate as much purchasing and economic power as we can amass to transform the living situations of the people in our communities. So Hassan's...
What was the name of the credit union?
Hope. Yeah,
Okay.
Hope Credit Union.
I can remember that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Liberty and Hope, those are the two that we have a strategic partnership with.
So we hope we're going to get some Liberty. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
There you go.
Okay.
So to answer his question about cooperatives in Mississippi, I would direct you to our immediate website, which is cooperationjackson.org, which has much more about our overall program. The cooperatives that we are developing are all listed there, and there's actually by March 1st, there'll be a major kind of an upgrade and expansion of our website. So just be on the lookout for that, Hassan, and everyone who's listening. And you also want to go to the Mississippi Association of Cooperatives. The acronym is MAC, which is the Mississippi division of the Federation of Southern Cooperatives, which we are a part of. That has the broader listing of the different cooperatives that exist throughout the state of Mississippi.
Okay, MAC is a part of the Federation of Southern Co-ops.
Correct.
Okay. And that's Mississippi, what did you call it? MAC?
Mississippi Association of Cooperatives.
Okay.
Yeah. And most of those cooperatives, just so folks know, Hassan knows, the vast majority of cooperatives that are real cooperatives, and I'll come to why I say that in a minute, they are agricultural entities that exist in predominantly rural areas. Cooperation Jackson is part of our whole thinking and history, is to extend the motto, extend the history, extend the practice into an urban area. So in this regard, we are somewhat unique in kind of the southern context, because throughout most of the South, most of the cooperatives that folks would know will either be credit unions or some type of agricultural entity or a utility company, because most of the electricity in states like Mississippi is actually provided by entities that are cooperatives in name, but not necessarily cooperatives in practice, the vast majority of them. That's definitely true here in the state of Mississippi, where you have a number of cooperatives that were built as a product of the New Deal. A lot of them as extensions of the Tennessee Valley Authority development, but they have never, in some cases, never functioned really as democratic organizations and entities. There's definitely been very little education over those, 7 decades. So folks understand them. There's been one major campaign that I'm aware of, which took place in the 80s and 90s to democratize them, which ran into some very visceral and violent and confrontational racism. And now, in our present day, there actually is a new campaign to try to get many of those cooperatives to go green and become primarily utilizers of solar thermal energy and wind power energy, but we're still meeting some resistance there in the state of Mississippi and beyond, and that is something ourselves and Highlander and the Federation and many others are in part working on as well, to kind of recapture that space and to transform it to bring us into the 21st century. So I'm mentioning all of this so folks have information, but also just to be clear that when folks do some research and certain things have the name cooperative, you got to look a little bit deeper to see, what is their actual democratic practice and governance to see if they're really functioning
as a cooperative
in line with the principles of the cooperatives.
Well, cooperationjackson.org is where you can go online, and I've got it up right now. And I would encourage you, Kylie, to change that to cooperationjackson.coop. And the first button on the left, and after the heading you see is Education, Motivate, and Organize. And then at the left, at the bottom left, it says Donate Now. So I would encourage you to go on and donate to Cooperation Jackson so folks down there can do all of the things. He just, in the first minute, he told us about 7 or 8 things that they have on their plate to do. So if you could donate. And you also said what little resources you have. Do you have a goal of raising some funds, and how much are you trying to raise, and how can we help you?
Well, we have several goals. Right now, just to bring people up there practically, we are in the midst of a capital drive for 2 co-ops, Freedom Farms Cooperative and Nubia's Place Cafe and Catering Cooperative.
What's that first word you said? What was that
Nubia's.
First? Nubian.
Nubia's Place. Okay. And it's named in honor of Nubia Lumumba, who was the partner and wife of our former mayor, Chokwe Lumumba, who our Lumumba Center is named after both of them, Chokwe and Nubia Lumumba. So that we're honoring her with the naming of that particular cafe. And the cafe right now is in a capital drive to raise $50,000 to be able to buy some new equipment, and particularly looking to buy a food truck so that we can do some service in the community that way and throughout the region that way for kind of special events and concerts. So that cooperative group is looking to raise that much money. And then the Freedom Farms, which is in a different space, they're actually looking to expand and acquire some property adjacent to some properties that we already have to be able to kind of expand overall production. And we're looking to raise for that one close to $100,000 to be able to purchase land and to do the build out necessary to do several hoop houses and a greenhouse. And then overall, we're going to be launching a major push within the next probably 2 months to raise for a land fund for the CLT. There's a new opportunity which is being opened up by the city council, which is both poses some potentialities for us for the overall threat of gentrification and displacement that we're trying to combat in the community overall that we're trying to deal with. And so one of the things we're going to be calling on all of our supporters and everyone who believes in the value of both Black land ownership and cooperative economics to support us with. And that is, we're going to be a major call to push to participate in this acquiring blighted land and property legislation, which is going to open up, a short window is going to open up in Jackson, probably about a 2-month time. So we're getting ready for that. And then we're asking for another $100,000 to do that. And this is a case so folks understand kind of how important it is that with those resources, not only will we likely be able to acquire about 50 lots within a section of West Jackson, but that will be enough to convert them within a 6-month period to productive use as farming plots. So these are some things that we're looking for, and hopefully, folks in the audience understands. Someone in the audience, or many people in the audience, will understand the value of what we're trying to do and can support in any way you can. We have and are continuing to develop a very robust kind of sustainer program. We're already at a level now where we're receiving about $3,000 per month just from sustainer contributions, which are a lifeline for us. And it goes to show, what $5 and $10 and $20 contributions can add up to when people put their minds to it and work cooperatively together.
Listen, I'm online right now, and I hit that donate now button, and I'm almost filled it out while you were talking. I was listening. Wasn't paying 100% attention. I hope you forgive me because I'm filling out this form.
Okay.
Okay. And I'm gonna donate $1,000 right now.
Appreciate that.
I love what you're doing, brother. We did meet this summer in Cincinnati, and we're going to talk about the unions here in a minute. But I love your energy level and what all you're doing. I looked at a couple of videos of you last night, and your trip to Paris, and your breadth of knowledge. So I used to not tell people when I would give money, but some preacher told me you tell folks when you give money because that'll give you a chance to tell you how good God is. So God has blessed me tremendously, more than, and I grew up in a little city in West Virginia called Bluefield, West Virginia. My grandfather worked in the mines, and my father worked on the railroad, totally blue collar. But in the 60s, there was money to go to college, and there was money, and I got 2 master's degrees. And so I've been much more blessed than I ever could have imagined. So it's like, how can I help? And my money is going to cooperators. And that's what you're doing. We got to take our next break, though, and then we'll come back and talk more about this. And you can go online at cooperationjackson.org, and you can donate and see what all the brothers and sisters down there are doing. But we'll be right back. Please don't touch it down. And we only have one more segment to go. The hour goes by real quick.
1450 WOL.
That's right. Information is power, and we're getting a lot of information about Jackson, Mississippi. And I just want to go back to this co-op piece a minute. Why did you decide to go co-op? Why did you decide to create all of these different co-ops that you talked about? The Community Land Trust, 20 Lots, Eco Village, Urban Farms, Grocery Store, other co-ops. Why? Why co-ops?
Good question. I mean, for me personally, I grew up in and around kind of cooperative enterprises as a child, and I didn't even quite understand that is what I was experiencing until I got somewhat older. But I'm a product of how successful they can be and how they help folks who are poor, and I grew up fairly poor. But they helped us survive. My mother participating in a cooperative venture with many other black women in Los Angeles, getting food every Saturday from that. Where we didn't have much money, was a lifesaver. Living in cooperative housing as a child on different occasions to keep the expenses down and being able to live in decent, affordable housing, really helped. And those are things which I think, helped my mother to have time and energy to put into her children so that all of us could go to college and develop ourselves. So it was when I got to college myself and experienced living in a co-op in college. I didn't live in a dorm. I lived in a co-op, and I did that intentionally because I remember that and what it entailed as a child, a little bit younger. That left a deep impression upon me around how we need to democratize our economy in order to serve the greatest and broadest need. And that just doing a business in the manner of pursuing profit at the expense of other humans and of the environment was a course toward destruction. So I've always been geared and oriented in different phases of my life of engaged in a number of cooperative practices, but it really wasn't until a group of us really started to look at how could we try to improve the quality of life in Jackson as a major commitment and project some 15 years ago that we started to really dig in and try to understand, well, how does the economy in this municipality in this city, how does it function? How does it work? Where are the opportunities that we can kind of intervene in, things that require a great deal of capital, things that require little capital, where there's the human capacity and skill that already exists. And this is a process you keep exploring. I mean, now that we're into it, certain things have surfaced that was somewhat off or somewhat wrong. New opportunities have opened up. So we're constantly learning, and that's part of the process. But for me, it really comes down to transforming the lives of people, particularly poor, impoverished, oppressed, excluded, marginalized people, and what is the best means to do that in our society, which is democratic, which gives people real power, not only in the voting booth, but where I think it matters in people's day-to-day lives. That is something that I wanted to make a contribution towards, and putting as much time and energy as I can into it.
Kylie, you just explained that better than I could ever explain it. I have gotten into co-ops, not at school. You were fortunate. What school, by the way, did you go?
I went to UC Davis.
So UC Davis have student housing co-ops, and just for anybody else out there, that's the organization's North American Students of Cooperation, NASCO, and you can go on their webpage at nasco.coop, or just Google, as I did, student housing co-ops, and it will come up, and you can find out which schools have housing co-ops. And I've had people on this program, Kylie, that said that they learned more in their co-op about getting a loan and managing and leadership than they did in their classroom studies. So that's one thing. But I didn't get this until I started managing housing co-ops. What I do for a living every day is property management. So in managing housing co-ops, I found out about co-ops, and the 7 principles is why I like them, and you said them in different kinds of ways. But volunteer and open membership doesn't care about your gender, your social, your racial, your political, or how much money you have or don't have. Democratic member control, 1 member, 1 vote. Member economic participation. Most co-ops, you put a little bit in to join, and if there's a profit or surplus, you get something back. And that's where you can build wealth. Autonomy and independence. You have to be able to have democratically control over the enterprise. Number 5 is education, training, and information. And when I found out about that and how much people learn in co-op, particularly adults really grab this and they learn it because they use it every day. Cooperation among cooperatives, cooperators working together to help each co-op, and then concern for community. So those are the reasons that I like co-ops, and you explained it, but I went to the principles. You've mentioned voting booth. You've mentioned politics. You've mentioned the politics in Mississippi, and I also want to talk about the politics in this Democratic presidential election.
Mm-hmm.
So how important is this voting and this Democratic control thing?
I would say it's central. I would say it's the lifeblood. And sometimes it's not always voting. Sometimes it's struggling and striving for consensus of your membership, which is a little different process, and it's something that we try to employ, which takes more time, which takes more effort. But within our experience, it builds more of a deeper understanding of where we're all coming from, what are our interests, what are our material interests, what are our psychological and social interests and fears and concerns, taking all those things into account so that at the end of the day, we can truly be on the same page and be most effective. But people having a voice, people having a vote, being able to determine the course of, how their time, energy, labor, resources are utilized, I think it's invaluable. And you see, in our experience, first people are not used to democracy. That's one thing. We really are not used to democracy. So oftentimes when folks come into some of our, practices, and it's a struggle because the struggle for democracy is constant, people are uncomfortable because it's normally what normally most of us have an experience or there's someone who, a boss or a manager of some kind,
yep.
Who just tells you what to do, and you kind of either like it or not like it, but find some way to do it if you want to keep your job, etc. So there's always that kind of push and pull. But once people get a hold of it, they don't want to let it go. That's our experience.
So there's a hierarchical,
real taste of it.
We're really a hierarchical society that there's like a pyramid and somebody at the top telling you what to do. And it's in your home, in your church, in your business. And that's the society we live in. And when you start talking about democracy of one member, one vote, and everybody has a say, trying to get people to say something. I'm changing my company in the process with my employees to a worker-owned cooperative, and we're struggling with that right now. Yeah. We're struggling with it. And so we keep having training. We had one all day Tuesday. We had a training dealing with this, getting people to the point where they're comfortable with saying what they need to say. Because too often people are not used to saying what's on their mind because they're afraid of getting fired or, some consequence.
Right.
So getting people used to that and then getting other people used to listening. Okay. That's another hard part.
That's the other end. You're right.
So, and that's me too. All right.
Yeah.
Okay. So you're saying that the Democratic piece, this voting. Now, I think consensus is still a vote. Somebody has to say I'm in or I'm not in. Consensus is where pretty much everybody agrees with the approach that we're going to take. Because we had a training on that. We've been an autocratic business where I made the final decision, or if I decided that they could make the decision. But the trainer pointed out they're still autocratic. Because I'm the one that has to decide, you all can make that decision, as opposed to it being a co-op where it's in the documents who makes what decision, and the people, the employees, make the decision of what's in the documents. How are we going to do this thing? How are we going to make decisions, and who's going to make decisions? So, it is phenomenal, and it is great. Talk a minute about, I've come to the conclusion that the votes in Mississippi or in Jackson, who's on the city council, who's the mayor, who's the governor, are more important than the president. But the presidential elections are also very important. And people come out for the presidential, but not for the local. And we only have a minute to go, buddy. So what do you think about that?
Okay. No, these elections are very critical. There's a right drift which is taking place. And the rhetoric that we haven't seen since, I would say really since the 1930s, which should be concerning to all of us. So however you vote, whether it's me being partisan, whether you vote for Bernie or you go green and vote for Jill, be very strategic about it. Folks need to turn up, I think, for this one. and see that as a key site of struggle. But I think folks have to get even more so prepared for what happens on November 3rd and beyond. And that's where I think co-ops and us building co-ops as a broad movement is strategic and important. So I encourage everybody to engage in both those aspects.
Well, I'm for Bernie, too. I like his rhetoric, but I've also tell everybody he can only win if we support him, and he can only get done what he says he's going to do if we're behind him every day. I mean,
That's
getting
right.
out and marching and saying, here's what we got to do. We got to change this stuff. We got to get money for education. We got to get all of these different things, health care, so housing. Thank you, buddy. It's over. I'd love to talk to you another hour. We'll do it again one day. But I really appreciate everything that you had to say, and I also love it when I'm learning, and I was learning. For everybody else, we're going to have Jessica Gordon-Nimhard on next week, who wrote the book Collective Courage. Thank you, and y'all have a good week.
1450 WOL.